What if I told you that some of the most productive, delicious, and valuable fruit and nut trees you could possibly grow are the ones that thrive in the shade? Trees that don't need full sun to produce incredible harvests. Trees that our ancestors planted under the canopy of larger trees, in woodland gardens, in the difficult north-facing spots that modern orchardists say are worthless. Most people don't know this. But while we're all cramming fruit trees into the sunniest spots in our yards and watching them struggle with heat stress and sun scald, there are trees out there that actually prefer partial shade, produce more reliably in cooler spots, and give you harvests that you literally cannot find in any grocery store. And today, I'm going to show you 12 of them that will completely change the way you think about growing food forever. Stick around, because number 9 on this list has been producing fruit in the understory of forests for millions of years, tastes better than any tropical fruit you've ever tried, and most people walk right past it without knowing what they're missing. And number 12 produces nuts that are so valuable they were used as currency, yet it thrives in shade that would kill most other nut trees. Hey there, and welcome back. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now because we post videos every week that'll save you time, money, and a whole lot of frustration when you're growing your own food. We're all about practical, tested wisdom that actually works, not trendy nonsense that sounds good but fails in real gardens. And to my returning viewers, thank you for being here week after week. Your comments and success stories keep me motivated to dig deeper and bring you information you won't find anywhere else. Today we're talking about shade-tolerant fruit and nut trees. And I need to be honest with you right up front. This information has been deliberately ignored by the mainstream gardening industry. Why? Because shade-tolerant trees don't fit the commercial orchard model. Commercial growers need trees that produce massive yields in full sun, planted in rows, harvested by machines. So for the last 80 years, all the breeding work, all the research money, all the publicity has gone to sun-loving trees, and shade-tolerant species got left behind, forgotten, dismissed as primitive or low-yielding. But here's what they don't tell you. For home gardeners, shade-tolerant trees are often better. They fit into spaces that would otherwise be wasted. They produce unique flavors you can't buy anywhere. They handle challenges like heat waves and water stress better, because they evolved to grow in the protected environment under forest canopies. They're tougher, more disease-resistant, and way less fussy than their sun-loving cousins. These are the trees that grew in cottage gardens and dooryard orchards for hundreds of years. The trees that fed people before industrial agriculture told us that only full-sun monocultures were worth planting. The trees that actually want to grow in that shady corner of your yard where you thought nothing would survive. And the conspiracy goes deeper than just neglect. Some of these trees produce crops that compete with commercial products. Some produce so reliably that they'd reduce dependence on grocery stores. Some are so tough and low maintenance that they'd eliminate the need for expensive inputs that big ag companies profit from. I'm not saying there's a smoke-filled room where people plot against pawpaws and hazelnuts. I'm saying there's a system that profits from you buying apples and almonds from California instead of growing shade bush and chinquapins in your own backyard. And that system has no incentive to tell you about better options. So let's break that system. Let's talk about 12 incredible trees that laugh at shade and produce food that'll blow your mind. Number 1. Let's start with the American persimmon. And I'm not talking about the big orange Asian persimmons you see in stores. I'm talking about the native species that grows wild throughout the eastern United States and produces fruit that tastes like honey mixed with dates with a hint of apricot. American persimmons are smaller than Asian types, about the size of a golf ball, but the flavor is so concentrated and sweet that one bite will ruin store-bought persimmons for you forever. These trees naturally grow at the edge of forests and in woodland clearings, which tells you everything you need to know. They tolerate partial shade beautifully. In fact, in hot climates, afternoon shade actually helps them because it reduces water stress. The trees are incredibly tough, handling cold down to minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit, drought once established, poor soil, and pretty much any pest or disease you throw at them. They're slow to start producing, usually taking 5 to 7 years, But once they begin, they'll give you fruit for 50 years or more. And here's the best part. The fruit is ripe in fall when most other fresh fruit is done. You get this incredible sweet harvest just when everything else is finishing up. The only catch is you need to wait until the fruit is dead ripe, almost mushy, before you eat it. Unripe persimmons are astringent enough to make your mouth pucker. But ripe ones? Pure magic. Think of American persimmon as the patient friend who takes a while to warm up but then becomes the best friend you've ever had. Number 2 is the pawpaw. And if you've never had a pawpaw, you haven't lived. Pawpaws are the largest native fruit in North America, and they taste like a combination of banana, mango, and custard. The texture is creamy, almost like pudding, and the flavor is so tropical that people refuse to believe this fruit grows wild in places like Ohio and Michigan. Pawpaws are true understory trees, meaning they naturally grow beneath the canopy of larger trees in the forest. Young pawpaw trees actually require shade for the first few years of life. Full sun can scorch them. As they mature, they can handle more sun, but they produce perfectly well with just 4 to 6 hours of dappled light. These trees are bizarre in the best way. They have big tropical-looking leaves, maroon flowers that smell faintly like rotting meat to attract fly pollinators, and fruit that looks like a stubby green banana. They're completely cold-hardy, handling winters that would kill actual banana trees. They have virtually no pest problems because their leaves contain compounds that insects avoid. In fact, pawpaw leaves are the only food source for zebra swallowtail butterfly larvae, making them great for wildlife gardens. The fruit ripens in fall and tastes like you're on a Caribbean island instead of in a temperate forest. There's a reason Thomas Jefferson grew pawpaws at Monticello. There's a reason indigenous peoples celebrated pawpaw harvests for thousands of years. And there's a reason the commercial fruit industry wants nothing to do with them. They don't ship well, they ripen unevenly, and they can't be mechanized. But for backyard growers, they're absolute gold. It's like growing the most exotic tropical dessert in the shadiest part of your yard. Number 3 is the American hazelnut. While everyone's planting European hazelnuts in full sun and dealing with blight diseases, the Native American species is sitting in the shade, producing perfectly good nuts, and laughing at Eastern filbert blight, the disease that kills European varieties. American hazelnuts are shrubby trees that grow 8 to 12 feet tall and naturally occur at forest edges and in partial shade. The nuts are smaller than commercial hazelnuts, but have a richer, sweeter flavor that many people prefer. These plants are incredibly tough. They handle cold, heat, poor soil, and neglect. They sucker from the base, forming nice, thick clumps that produce more nuts as they mature. They're one of the first things to bloom in spring, providing crucial early pollen for bees when little else is flowering, and they produce nuts in late summer when you're getting hungry for fall harvests. The shells are thick, which means you need a nutcracker, but that also means squirrels have a harder time stealing them all. And if you plant 2 or more for cross-pollination, you'll get heavy crops almost every year. This is the nut tree that native peoples harvested for thousands of years before anyone imported European varieties. And you know what? They had the right idea. American hazelnuts fit into small spaces, produce reliably, require minimal care, and thrive in the partial shade under taller trees where nothing else productive will grow. They're the scrappy underdog that never needed improving in the first place. Number 4, the serviceberry, also called juneberry or shadbush. And this one's special because it gives you 3 seasons of beauty plus incredible fruit. Serviceberries bloom in early spring with clouds of white flowers. The berries ripen in early summer, usually June, tasting like a cross between blueberries and cherries with a hint of almond. Then in fall, the leaves turn brilliant orange and red. These are understory trees that naturally grow in the dappled shade of larger trees throughout North America. They handle full shade better than almost any fruiting plant, though they'll produce heavier crops with 4 to 6 hours of sun or bright dappled light all day. The berries are incredibly nutritious, higher in antioxidants than blueberries, and they're absolutely delicious fresh, dried, or in pies. Indigenous peoples throughout the continent used serviceberries as a staple food, often drying them for winter use or mixing them with meat and fat to make pemmican. The trees are completely cold-hardy, pest-resistant, and so low maintenance that they're actually used as ornamental landscaping trees. Except most landscapers don't tell you that the ornamental tree in your yard is producing pounds of gourmet berries. Service berries fruit early, usually before blueberries, giving you fresh berries at a time when you're desperate for anything homegrown. And the birds love them, which means you're feeding wildlife while feeding yourself. It's the multitasking tree that makes you look like a genius without any work on your part. Number 5 is the chi fruit, and this one's going to surprise you. Che is related to mulberries but produces fruit that tastes like a combination of watermelon, fig, and strawberry. The fruit is red, about the size of a large raspberry, and so sweet and juicy that it's addictive. Che trees are originally from East Asia but have been grown in North America since the 1800s. They're small trees, usually staying under 20 feet, and they naturally grow in woodland edges and clearings. They handle partial shade beautifully, producing well with just a few hours of morning sun or bright filtered light all day. The trees are incredibly cold-hardy for a fruiting mulberry relative, handling temperatures down to -10 or even -20 Fahrenheit. They have no significant pest or disease problems. They fruit prolifically once established, and the harvest season lasts for weeks in mid to late summer. Here's why chi trees disappeared from American gardens. The fruit doesn't ship at all. It's too delicate, too juicy, and it doesn't keep more than a day or two after picking, which makes it completely worthless for commercial production. But for home growers who can walk outside and pick fresh fruit, it's incredible. You're getting flavors and textures that most people will never experience because you can't buy chi fruit anywhere. It's like having exclusive access to a gourmet product that doesn't exist in commerce. Number 6, the Japanese raisin tree, which has the most misleading name in horticulture. You're not eating the fruit. You're eating the fruit stalks, which swell up and become thick, fleshy, and sweet. They taste like a combination of raisins, pears, and sweet spices, with a texture somewhere between a dried fig and a fresh pear. The actual fruits are small and not particularly interesting, but those swollen stalks are incredible. Japanese raisin trees naturally grow in mixed forests and handle partial shade without complaint. They're large trees, growing 30 to 40 feet tall, so they need space. But they're beautiful, with attractive leaves and interesting branching structure, and they produce these bizarre, sweet edible stalks in late fall, right when you've given up on getting anything fresh from the garden. The stalks can be eaten fresh or dried for later use. In Asia, they've been used in traditional medicine for thousands of years, and recent research suggests they might actually help with alcohol metabolism, which is fascinating. These trees are completely cold-hardy, pest-free, and low-maintenance. They handle urban conditions, poor soil, and neglect. They're one of those trees that you plant and forget about until suddenly in November you notice these weird, sweet things hanging from the branches and remember what you planted. It's like future you, leaving a present for yourself every fall. Now, if you're realizing that you've been lied to about what you can grow in shade and you're getting excited about the possibilities, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button right now. It tells the algorithm that this information matters and helps other gardeners find it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're building a community of growers who think outside the conventional orchard, and I want you to be part of it. All right, let's keep going because we're just getting to the really incredible ones. Number 7 is the American elderberry. Now, you might know about elderberries for immune support and syrup, but most people don't realize that elderberries naturally grow in partial shade at the edge of forests and along woodland streams. American elderberries are large shrubs or small trees that produce massive clusters of tiny purple-black berries in late summer. The berries are tart and need to be cooked, but once you make them into syrup, jelly, or pie filling, they're absolutely incredible, and the health benefits are legitimate. Elderberries have been used for centuries to support immune function, and modern research backs that up. These plants thrive in partial shade. In fact, in hot climates, afternoon shade helps them because it keeps the berries from shriveling in intense sun. They grow fast, produce within 2 to 3 years, and can live for decades. They have attractive white flower clusters in early summer that smell sweet and are edible themselves, often made into fritters or cordial. Then the berries come in late summer, and one mature plant can produce 10 to 20 pounds. Elderberries handle wet soil better than most fruiting plants, making them perfect for those low spots where water collects. They're cold-hardy, pest-resistant, and so vigorous that they're almost weedy. The only real maintenance is pruning out old wood every few years to keep production high. This is the medicinal tree that produces food, beauty, and health benefits in the shady, damp spots where most fruit trees would drown or sulk. It's like having a pharmacy and a pantry in one low-maintenance plant. Number 8. The Korean nut pine. While everyone's planting regular pine nuts that take 20 years to produce, Korean nut pines are dropping edible seeds in 6 to 8 years. The nuts are large for a pine nut, easy to shell, and taste rich and buttery. They're the same pine nuts you pay premium prices for in stores, except you're growing them in your yard. Korean nut pines are smaller than many pine trees, usually staying under 30 feet in cultivation. They naturally grow in mixed forests in mountainous regions of Asia, which means they handle partial shade just fine. They're incredibly cold-hardy, pest-free, and once established, completely drought-tolerant. The trees have attractive blue-green needles and a nice pyramidal shape, making them excellent landscaping trees that happen to produce gourmet food. Pine nuts are insanely expensive in stores, often $30 a pound or more. One mature Korean nut pine can produce several pounds of nuts per year. Do the math. You're looking at a tree that produces hundreds of dollars worth of nuts annually, while requiring basically zero maintenance, and it'll do that for 100 years or more. The cones mature in fall, and you harvest them, let them dry, and shake out the nuts. It's easy, productive, and profitable if you wanted to sell them. This is the retirement plan tree that keeps producing long after you've stopped working, and it laughs at shade that would stunt most other nut trees. Number 9, and this is the one I mentioned at the beginning, is the wild pawpaw's cousin, the temperate banana shrub, also called the prairie banana or false pawpaw. Just kidding. Number 9 is actually the Asian persimmon variety called Saijo, which, unlike most Asian persimmons, handles partial shade beautifully and produces fruit that tastes like brown sugar mixed with pumpkin pie spices. Okay, I'm having fun with you. Number 9 is really the Native American plum. American plums are small trees that grow at the edge of forests throughout North America and produce fruit that ranges from sweet to tart depending on the variety. The fruits are small, usually cherry-sized, but the flavor is intense. We're talking about plums that taste more like plum than any grocery store plum you've ever had. These trees naturally form thickets at woodland edges, which means they evolved to handle partial shade. They bloom incredibly early, often in March, with clouds of white flowers that smell amazing. The fruit ripens in mid to late summer, and while it's small, it's productive. One thicket can produce gallons of fruit. American plums are completely cold-hardy, surviving winters that would kill European and Asian varieties. They're immune to most of the diseases that plague domestic plums. They sucker from the roots, forming colonies that produce more as they spread. And they're one of the best wildlife trees you can plant, feeding everything from bees in spring to birds and mammals in summer. The fruit is perfect for jelly, jam, and sauce. You can also eat it fresh if you get a good sweet variety. And it's so far superior to store-bought plums in flavor that there's really no comparison. This is the plum that pioneers relied on, that native peoples harvested for thousands of years, and that modern orchardists ignore because the fruit is too small to sell commercially. But for flavor, it wins every time. Number 10, the heart nut, which is a variety of Japanese walnut that produces nuts shaped like little hearts. And yes, they're as cute as that sounds. But more importantly, they crack easily, the kernels come out whole, and they taste like a mild, sweet walnut without any bitterness. Heart nuts are much faster to produce than English walnuts, usually bearing in 4 to 6 years instead of 10 to 15. The trees are smaller, topping out around 40 feet instead of 80, and they handle partial shade significantly better than English walnuts. They naturally grow in mixed forests in Japan, where they're part of the understory below taller trees. These trees are incredibly cold-hardy, handling -30 Fahrenheit or colder. They have few pest problems. They're more disease-resistant than English walnuts, and the nuts are so easy to crack that kids can do it. You just tap the point of the heart with a hammer, and the shell splits perfectly, dropping out a whole kernel. Try that with a regular walnut. The flavor is mild and sweet, perfect for eating fresh or using in baking. And the trees are productive, giving you 30 to 50 pounds of nuts per year once mature. Heart nuts disappeared from American gardens because they're not quite as productive as English walnuts in perfect full-sun orchard conditions. But for home growers dealing with shade, cold, or less than perfect conditions, they're superior. It's the nut tree that makes you look like a genius when you serve guests walnuts that crack easily and taste better than anything they've bought. Number 11. The cheese close relative, the Cudrania or silkworm thorn. This small tree produces fruit that looks like tiny red mulberries but tastes like a combination of watermelon and cantaloupe with a hint of rose. The fruit is small and fiddly to pick, which is exactly why commercial growers ignore it. But the flavor is so unique and delicious that once you try it, you'll gladly spend time harvesting. Cudrania naturally grows in woodland edges in East Asia and handles partial shade without any loss of production. The trees are small, usually under 20 feet, with attractive foliage and interesting gnarled branches. They're extremely cold-hardy for a plant with tropical-tasting fruit, handling well below zero. They have no pest or disease problems, and they fruit reliably every single year once established. The harvest season is mid-summer, and the fruit comes on gradually, giving you small harvests over several weeks instead of one overwhelming glut. You can eat Cudrania fresh, make it into jam, or dry it like raisins. In Asia, the leaves are used to feed silkworms, which is where the common name comes from. But for American growers, it's all about that fruit. It's like chi fruit's slightly smaller, equally delicious cousin that nobody's heard of. Which means you get to be the person who introduces everyone to a flavor they didn't know existed. And finally, number 12, the tree I've been saving for last, the chinquapin, which is a relative of chestnuts that produces sweet nuts in partial shade where chestnuts would struggle. Chinquapins are smaller than chestnuts, about the size of a large marble, but they're incredibly sweet, require no processing or cooking, and can be eaten raw right out of the shell. They taste like a cross between a chestnut and a hazelnut with a hint of vanilla. There are several species of chinquapin native to different parts of North America. The Allegheny chinquapin grows in the east, the Ozark chinquapin in the Midwest, and several species in the west. All of them naturally grow in forests and woodland edges, handling partial shade beautifully. And here's the amazing part. Chinquapins are largely resistant to chestnut blight, the disease that wiped out billions of American chestnuts in the early 1900s. While chestnuts require careful selection of blight-resistant varieties, chinquapins just shrug it off. These trees are small to medium-sized, usually 20 to 40 feet depending on species. They produce nuts in spiny burrs like chestnuts, but smaller. The nuts ripen in fall and are so sweet that they were considered a delicacy by indigenous peoples throughout their range. They were also so valuable for food that in some areas they were used in trade. Chinquapins are tough, cold-hardy, pest-resistant, and low-maintenance. They produce within 3 to 5 years from seed, which is incredibly fast for a nut tree. They handle a wide range of soils, and they produce reliably in the dappled shade under taller oaks and hickories where most other nut trees would fail. This is the nut tree that should have replaced American chestnuts after the blight, but instead, we imported Asian chestnuts and tried to breed blight resistance into American chestnuts, ignoring the native tree that already had the resistance and produced perfectly good nuts. Chinquapins represent everything we've talked about today. A productive, delicious, valuable tree that thrives in conditions where conventional wisdom says nothing should grow, that's been feeding people for thousands of years, and that got overlooked because it didn't fit the commercial model. So there you have it. 12 shade-tolerant fruit and nut trees that'll produce incredible harvests in spots you thought were useless. Trees that laugh at the conventional orchard advice that says you need full sun and perfect conditions. Here's what I want you to understand. The modern fruit industry has spent a century convincing you that only certain trees are worth planting. Trees that need full sun, heavy fertilization, constant spraying, and perfect conditions. Why? Because that model creates dependence. Dependence on inputs, dependence on expert advice, dependence on purchasing fruit from stores when your trees fail. So here's my challenge. Pick 2 trees from this list, just 2. Find spots in your yard that get partial shade, those spots you thought were useless. Order the trees, plant them, and then wait. Some will produce in a few years, some will take longer, but all of them will outlive you, feeding your children and grandchildren long after you're gone. And come back in the comments and tell me which ones you chose. Tell me about your shady spots and what you're planning. I read every comment and I love hearing from you. If you found this valuable and you're seeing your property with new eyes, realizing that shady corner isn't a problem but an opportunity, smash that like button. It helps this reach other people who need to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the next video. We're covering raised bed mistakes next week, and I guarantee I'm going to make some people angry with what I say about treated lumber. Until next time, keep planting smart, keep questioning the conventional wisdom, and remember that some of the best food grows in the shade where nobody thought to look. I'll see you in the next one. Now get out there and start planning your shade orchard.